I want to pay my respect to the teachers past and present of Yirrkala, Gunyangara and the homelands who have for decades worked tirelessly towards the Yolngu vision for education. These men and women work in difficult situations and on task that is of national importance. They continue to work with Yolngu families to give children a future through education. But before I introduce my colleagues, I want to touch briefly on the work that has happened at the Gunyangara and Berejimi communities. Some will remember the abyss that the Gunyangara community was staring into a decade ago as work participation was waning, school attendance was down and suicide had become an unwelcome guest in the community. I have been privileged to witness the extraordinary turnaround in this community, and I want to mention just two statistics. The first is enrolment at Gunyangara and Berejimi at Nhulunbuy School and its Gunyangara Annex. Since April 2013, enrolment has increased by 30%. A 30% increase in kids enrolled in the last 2 years means that there is a commitment from parents to get their kids into school. Secondly, attendance is now at an average very close to 75%, and this is an increase of 24% since April 2013 on attendance. And this means that parents want to keep their kids at school. The tide is running strongly in the right direction, and I want to congratulate all of the families at Gunyangara and Berejimi for this work. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers that have joined us to provide their insights on this particular key forum session entitled Update on Education and Reform Initiatives. To my right is Mr. Brian Sampson. He's the chairman of the Western Desert Aboriginal Land Corporation and local resident of the Jigalong community. We have Mr. Noel Pearson, chairman of the Cape York Academy, who has focused on education under the organisation Good to Great Schools and continues to inspire us all. To my left, I have Chief Executive Officer of the Northern Territory Department of Education, Mr. Ken Davies. Ken is here to provide us with an update on the review into Indigenous education reform. I was hoping, Mr. Brian Sampson, you might start our conversation and share some of your stories with us today.
I'll just go back into, give you a bit of history a little bit about in 1946, my people actually had a strike to have a better and to be treated equal or to be a part of the industry and able to grow and build their own economy. That's happened in 1946. They actually had a strike in some of the parcel, and the leading people were some of our Māori people that play the major role on that. Then in 1946 until 1940s, go back to the history again at Jigalong, where the missionaries actually came to our and built a lot of our missionaries and the small settlement where is known as Jigalong community. So a lot of our people actually come from the Canning stock route, and because they got forced out of their own country and they moved west into somebody else's land. And I think one of them fellas actually here today came, and he's a Nyebali, Victor, who's actually one of the traditional owners of that land in particular, where we actually got our corporation and the community and the population of 350 people that actually lives there now. But the main key thing that we're actually trying to do now is to fix up the failure over the last 50 years since the government's introduced the school system and had failed. And because of the way that the school was actually set up, we had no control over it because they was controlling us, and we need to order to change that. So we came a long way of doing that, and we were just looking for a way of trying to better our education. And it's actually happened in the last 18 months or so that we actually had a look at what Noel was actually doing in Cape York. So therefore, I got instructed by the board to go and have a look exactly what they actually done down there, and then bring that idea back to the Māori people so that we can able to have a look at how we can probably keep a better future for our kids into the future that they can able to become who they want actually to be, but not losing the identity of which particular tribe they actually come from. So those two actually need to be mixed, work together, hand in hand. So education is very important, but to do it, we need to fix it at the grassroots level and to allow the government and any other government department that's actually involved to understand how it's actually need to be work, partnership, and the outcome of direct instructions where Noel has been working for many years, and we want to try and able to bring that across to Māori's country so that we can able to try and have that better system. The one that I actually had in Cape York was a better system, and how do we actually try and introduce that into Māori's country. And we've done, and I think we've found a lot of the best result that actually comes out of that school over the last 40 years, the failure of all the school that actually that I actually been through. I've seen a lot of failure in the last 40 years, and in the last two years, it's just actually changed the way the kids are now starting to read and write better because of the direct instruction that actually came into the mother country. So I will actually let probably Noel to talk a bit more about that, because it was actually the idea that brought through, caught my attention of changing the way the school. Yeah.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you, Brian, and thank you everyone for participating in our session. It's obvious that our children's education is the key. The future of our people depends on education. The future of our remote communities depends on education. Whatever mineral, timber, agricultural, whatever resources we have, nothing is more important than our children. The biggest economic return we will ever get is from children. The single one factor we can put into the future is our children. Everybody knows that. We know it at the level of platitude, but it's got to be more than that. It's a reality, it's the truth, and it's the best return we can get from effort of anything we do. If we're going to talk about financial return, we will get more return from our kids than anything else we choose to put our time and money into. So it's an absolute key for the future of our people, our culture, our communities, to get education right. And Brian is exactly right. We've not been doing it right these last 40 years. I have a very simple approach to school transformation and improvement. My approach is that children need effective instruction. And I say this uphill and down dale all across the countryside, and I think we understand effective instruction is important, but I don't think people really understand what is meant when I say that. Effective instruction is the keystone to getting schools right. I kind of liken it to the difference between me trying to chop a tree down with an axe that I've sharpened as opposed to an axe that my father sharpened. I'm a pretty good axe sharpener, but when I used my father's axe to chop a tree, there's a whole world of difference. My father was also a butcher. He was a drover and then a butcher. And I sharpen knives as well. But it's nothing like the way my father sharpened a knife. The sharper the instruction, the easier it is to get through the tree. And get the technique right, and if your curriculum and pedagogy is as sharp as it can be, then you really see a difference, the like of which most people who don't think about these things and don't see it for themselves, I think I'm talking alien talk. Because I've just got to impress upon you that the thing that lies between the good teacher and the present student is the effective instruction. And part of the business of effective instruction is to pitch, as direct instruction does, the learning just in front of the nose of the child so that they experience success in the very next lesson you teach them. They can get the very next lesson. That's the way the program is designed, and if you've tested the kid and placed her in the program properly, the very first lesson is the lesson she wins at. She tastes success. And then a virtuous cycle starts because the teacher has seen her experience success and the teacher experiences teaching success. And a wheel starts to turn. Learning success, driving teaching success, driving learning success, driving teaching success, and the kid wants to learn more. And the teacher is getting it, that her teaching is producing success. And a virtuous engine starts to turn between the teacher and the student. And in those classrooms where effective instruction is taking place, it's not just her, it's her classmates who are engaged in this virtuous process of teaching and learning. And after a while, the classroom starts to hum. The behavior starts to lock in behind the learning. And misbehavior becomes kind of a subsidiary thing to the child's desire to learn more. And you get a classroom humming, and the next challenge for the principal and those working to lift this school is you're trying to get more and more classrooms humming and this virtuous engine turning. And after weeks and months, sometimes you can hear the whole school hum. This engine starts to turn over in the school. And the first thing for failing schools to do, the first challenge, is to turn the ship around. It's heading south, it's got to go north. And McKinsey and Company put up a framework to understand the nature of school systems that said you could virtually categorize school systems across the world, those that are kind of poor to fair, those that are fair to good, those that are good to great, and those that are great to excellent. And they came up with an analysis of the kind of interventions you need at each stage of the journey. They looked at systems over the last 50 years, from Singapore to Finland, to Ontario, to England, to Africa and Asia and Shanghai. And they noticed a pattern across each of those improvement stages, from poor to fair, fair to good, good to great, great to excellent. And you know, down the poor to fair, the worst schools or school systems going to fair, I read their prescriptions that came out of the evidence, and it reads like this. Firstly, you've got to attend to the children's basic needs. They've got to be fed and clothed. Their basic needs have got to be attended to. And I thought, yeah, tick. We do that. We are striving to take care of the basic needs of our kids. Second prescription, you need to get the kids in the seats. Strangely enough, they've got to be present. And so we said, tick. Third thing, you've got to have scripted instruction. They did scripted instruction in Singapore 50 years ago. They did scripted instruction in Shanghai when they first started. They're doing scripted instruction in Africa and India and in other places where systems are trying to get off the ground and become fair. So when I read this, I thought, tick, we're doing direct instruction. It is a scripted program. And the fourth prescription was that you need to train and coach teachers in their teaching. You've got to provide support to the teachers so that they can increase their skills to deliver instruction. And we seek to do that with our program as well. So we believe in Cape York we've made the journey from poor to fair. We run fair schools. We run 3 academies that are public schools but controlled by our community. And we believe that within 6 months we made the journey from poor to fair. We turned the boat around. So if you go to any of our 3 schools today, you will guarantee your child a fair education. And the journey that we've been on for the last 3 years has been to try to get from fair to good. And that is a journey that we're still on. We've set ourselves very clear indicators to get to good. I think one of our schools is definitely knocking on the door of good. But it's a journey. I hope that in the next 2 years, I'll be able to come back and say, yeah, we got a couple of good schools now. And the next part of our journey after that will be, we're going to go from good to great. You're going to be more privileged if you go to Cohen School in a few years' time than if you went to one of the better schools in Cairns or Brisbane. That's our goal. And already we're seeing non-Indigenous people who work in our communities, who send their children to school every day and who have no issues in relation to their family background and circumstances and so on, who are just flying through. So our approach to school reform is very simple. It's based on school turnaround, premised upon effective instruction, and we set ourselves the goal of steadily moving from poor to fair to good to great. Our program is not just direct instruction. We have a club program with music, stage bands, instrumental music. We have a club program with Tennis Australia and the AFL and all kinds of partners that are involved in our club program. We also have a community program to support children with attendance, families with managing money for their children, breakfast programs. and lunch programs. We want children to be school ready, to have uniforms, to have their health attended to. And if they've got special needs, we want to make sure they're properly diagnosed and served. And we also have a childhood program aimed at addressing the period between birth and grade 1. We know we have to attend that period between 0 and 5 in order to maximize our children's success in primary school. So that's our model. We call it the 5C model: class, club, culture, community, and childhood. In order to do all of these things, we convince the parents in these communities we need to have your kids from 8 o'clock to 4:30. We need a full school day. We got an action-packed program for them. We want them to play trombones and trumpets and saxophones. We want them to be able to leave Cohen and join the school band at Clayfield College or Marist Brothers Ashgrove. That's our model. Cape York Academy's 5C model is an ambitious program, full day. We have 2 shifts of teachers. Those who start at 8 and go through to 12, and those who start at 10 and go through to 4. We make no apologies for the resources we need to put in for the benefit of those children. And we seek to engage the families in the success of their students. And it's the kind of real magic that comes when you show a parent what their child is capable of doing. It is the hook for parental engagement in the schools. I just want to urge upon everyone that this business of investing in fixing our schools, not just making them okay, but harbouring every ambition to make them really magnificent. These schools have got to one day turn from being schools into institutions. Because an institution is not one that is good 1 year and then no good a couple of years later. Like the old market gardens, yeah? Flourishing for a few years and then full of weeds for years afterwards. That is not a school. A school as an institution is good from 1 year to the next, and 10 years' time when you come back, it's as good as it was. We've got to turn these schools from kind of being kind of subject to the current principal and teachers to something that maintains a quality long after the good principal departed. So I really appreciate the opportunity this afternoon, Denise, to talk briefly about our education reform plans. I'm very pleased that my brother Brian and I share this passion for the education of our children. If we share anything, if Brian and I share anything, it is a complete belief that we've got to get this right for the future of our children. We've got to get the education right for the future of our children. There is no Madu future. There's no Guguyimir future unless we get the school thing right. The school must be the most glorious institution in our villages. It has got to be the most sanctified institution in our villages, although the Lutherans are already chiding me for saying that. So thank you very much. I see Selena here from Numbulwar, and I would love an opportunity for you to speak to this forum with us. Selena, if you could, because she's a teacher in one of the schools where I've seen magical things happening this week. And so, Denise, if there was an opportunity for Selena to testify to the work that her team is doing down the coast here, I'd really appreciate that opportunity, but let me not go on too much further now.
My name's Selena Uibo. I come from Numbulwar community, which is about 600 kilometres south of here, where we are, across the coastline, southeast Arnhem Land. My mother and father were both teachers and principals at Numbulwar, so maybe education's in the blood. My sister is currently finishing her early childhood teaching degree at Charles Darwin University, so very proud of her in her last 6 months, so that'll make 4 of 4 teachers in our family, in our immediate family. I spent my first year teaching in Darwin at a mainstream school at Casuarina Senior College, and I've been at Numbulwar for the last 4 years. I studied my university down in Queensland, just needed a bit of a change from the Northern Territory, so moved down there, took a few years off, and then spent a bit of time working and travelling overseas, and came back to Numbulwar and did a bit of tutoring in the upper primary class there, and decided this is where I want to be in a couple of years' time, and I want to have my degree up my sleeve, and I want to finish off my university. So I went back to Queensland. Luckily, they accepted me back, and finished off my uni down there at the University of Queensland. I think Auntie Jackie Huggins is here somewhere. She came to my graduation, so that was pretty exciting as well to have someone of her calibre supporting me through my university. I really enjoy teaching at Numbulwar. It does come with lots of challenges, of course. Teaching your family a classroom full of students who are all related to you does come with its challenges, as you can imagine. It also does come with a lot of success and a lot of sense of belonging in the right place. I don't really like to use the term role model. It gets flicked out a lot. But I like to be an example for my students to see that people from our community can go away and come back in whatever type of profession that they admire or that they choose to pursue. My 2 goals of going out to Numbulwar to be a teacher in the secondary there was, 1, to provide opportunities for the young people that I work with, with opportunities that they might not normally get exposed to because it is such a remote community. We get cut off in the wet season for about 5 months of the year, and it's very expensive to fly. And the second goal that I had was to pick up on the Wuboy language, which is my mum's language. I don't speak Wuboy fluently, unfortunately. I'm picking up more now that I do live and work in Numbulwar. I speak Creole and understand Creole fluently. That's nice and easy because I used to do that with my cousins all the time. So unfortunately not so great with the second goal, but the first goal has been really, really good. I've taken many students on excursions, intrastate across the Northern Territory, a couple of interstate excursions, Queensland and Victoria, and one international excursion where I took 2 students to do some volunteering in Cambodia, 2 senior students, which was an amazing experience for me and for them as well. Our school is a pilot school for the direct instruction. We've been doing it for 6 months now. We actually had Noel come out with Ken and the Minister for Education, Peter Chandler, on Wednesday, so that's probably why Noel remembers my name. I couldn't just hide in the back seats there. He remembered me from 3 days ago. And we're finding our school's trying very hard. Obviously, it's quite challenging. It's a different style of teaching, particularly for people who are creative and spontaneous and don't like necessarily this really scripted way of teaching. I personally am not ingrained in any type of program myself, and being a young person, I feel like I'm quite open to trying new techniques. And I found I'm really lucky teaching the secondary class at Numbulwar. I love my students, and they trust me a lot, and I trust them, so we get along really well. And they have responded extremely well to this style of teaching. I mean, you get your good days and your bad days, of course, of teaching in any type of profession. But they trust me enough to come along with the ride. Our school is putting a whole school approach, and I think anything to better the education for our students is worth a shot. I don't think necessarily it would work for every single school. I think it has to be something that schools and communities choose for themselves, as opposed to being mandated from the government or a particular department or an organisation. But I think the networking is extremely valuable, and seeing the different schools that have been trialling and succeeding, and coming up against challenges from Queensland, the Northern Territory and Western Australia, just in the short first few years across from Queensland, and for the Northern Territory ourselves this first 6 months. I think it's very important to share the stories, and to build on that, and to make sure that whatever it is that we do put in for our young people, particularly our Indigenous students in remote communities and regional areas, is 100% fully supported, fully resourced, and that we give it a good crack to give them the best chance possible.
As Selena said, Noel and Brian, it's great to have you here, and also Denise as well. And it's a hard act to follow, to come in and pick up after three people have spoken so passionately about education. But as the Chief Executive in the Northern Territory, I've been in the Territory for 38 years. I've been the Chief Executive for the past 2.5 years. It's my job to try to systematise and support some of these new initiatives that we're putting in place in Northern Territory education. I've got some of my team here with me here. I've got Tony Considine, who's leading the implementation of our Indigenous education strategy, and Rob here, who's the new Regional Director out in East Arnhem Land, and we've got Rob Picton, who's running our new Transition Education Unit. We've got a display down the other end, so if you want to get some more detail around what we're doing, please go and have a look at that model. I'm just going to stay at the high level, but then I want to quickly go down to the partnerships and what we're wanting to do in this East Arnhem region in particular. So that's where I wanted to get to. If Minister Scullion was still here, I would definitely be saying thank you to the Australian government, because we've negotiated a partnership with them as part of our plan. Now, last year I was here talking about the Indigenous Education Review and what it had found. And it was fair to say that I told everybody here we had some huge challenges, and we needed to do a whole lot of things differently to the way we had done in the past. And in fact, some of what we were going to be doing in the future was about revisiting that market garden that Noel was talking about. Was about weeding out some of the weeds and going back to some pretty basic sort of infrastructure that was all there in the 70s and the 80s, and starting to stay focused and on track. Now, we've got a commitment of $185 million in our plan for the next 3 years. Somebody said to me, is that enough? It's the Chief Executive who asked me that, and I said, well, I think my view is that's on top of the existing resources we've got. My biggest concern is that we don't waste it. That's our biggest issue. So we're going to go in with programs that work, that are effective, and that we can measure, and we don't want to waste this opportunity. The Wilson Review has literally given us an opportunity and a base point by which to get in and have a look at what we're doing and to refocus. So that has led to a partnership with Good to Great Schools and with Noel Pearson and his team. That has led to my minister and the Northern Territory Government getting over the Cape to have a look at the direct instruction model. And it has also forced us to have a look in our schools at how we've been delivering English literacy and numeracy programs in the past. And where we'd gotten to was, in effect, we had 64 small remote schools all using different methodologies. There was no one consistent methodology in our remote schools. We're going to pull it back, and we're going to have a systematised and targeted program in our primary schools around teaching English literacy and numeracy. Going to what Selena was talking about, and let's go to her classroom, an orderly learning environment is absolutely critical. If you'd walked into Selena's program like Noel and I did, into her class the other day, it was extremely well structured. The kids love her, and they were engaged in a teaching and learning program that was clearly delineated. Kids had their exercise books, their workbooks, they knew the routines. Over on one side was a set of basket weaving baskets that were for sale. They're running a little business area, so they're not just thinking about literacy and numeracy, they're translating it into practice by selling some goods out of their classroom and generating an income for them and their school. It was a fantastic room. I think in each of the schools we visited, Noel, we found some star teachers in every one of those places, and people having a really, really good red hot go at direct instruction and this new English literacy program. Teachers are telling me for the first time in a long while, one of these teachers was at Umbacumba. He's actually having students engaging with him in full sentences using English. Many children got away with a verbal understanding of English, but didn't engage orally using structured sentences. This program is driving, it's the full book. It's a literacy and numeracy program, but it's also absolutely teaching an oral English program as well, which is fantastic. We've been missing that since the 80s. In terms of this strategy, we're going to invest in early childhood programs. So we're expanding our Families as First Teachers program from 22 sites to 32, and we're going into new communities. In terms of the girls getting through our system, we've got a new girls engagement program that we're rolling out to our regional and urban high schools. It's the STARS Foundation. It's going into 7 sites. Marion Scrimgeour chairs the board. The board's got Martin Ferguson on it, David Peevers, some very, very important and powerful industry figures as well getting behind that work. We've established a transition support unit so that in secondary education, we can start to work with families when children in about year 5 or 6 in remote locations and talk to families, mums and dads, about the pathway that they want for their children. If it's on country and at that school, there will be a program there for them. If it's off country to a regional boarding school or hostel, there will be a pathway and a program for them. If it's to Darwin, there will be a pathway for them. And if it's interstate, there will be pathways that will be mapped out family by family for each of those children. We want to make a difference, and we can't just have no children or very few children, 20 in all last year across our 68 remote schools getting a Year 12 outcome at the end of Year 12. Starting with 800 students in the cohort at about Year 6 or 7, by the time we get to the end of that period, we have 20 children who actually graduate from a remote location with an NTCET. We have to do better. So, in terms of the local partnerships here, we've been working with YYF. We are building a hostel at the regional high school here at Nhulunbuy High School. We're going to be working very closely with each of the communities, the homeland communities. We don't want to, using Selena's point, to mandate the approach we're taking. That's why we've engaged with YYF. That's why we want to work with our communities out here to build the education program that we're going to deliver in the East Arnhem Land region. And it's got to have, as its focus, as its endpoint, this Year 12 outcome being the key. We have an outstanding high school in Nhulunbuy that delivers high-end Year 12 outcomes. If we can get more of our Aboriginal young people in to that school and through those programs and supported so that they can get home on country, that will give them the jobs that they need into the future and the prosperity that people have been talking about. In terms of our partnership with our partnerships, we've got the Good to Great partnership, which is becoming extremely important. There's the work we're doing out here on the ground with communities. Part of the strategy we've agreed to do is to go and sign up to a community charter with all our communities out there around what we can deliver, what the community can expect of us, and to be really engaging with them about what they want out of their school. We're going to do this school by school. We did that with the Yambirapa schools here, the Yambirapa School Council, many years ago, and the traditional owners that signed up to that, over time it's fair to say were disappointed. There are people here who would know about that. That's because the commitments that were made in that plan by the department weren't lived up to. They weren't lived up to. So we're going to try and revisit that. And this time we won't be walking away from our commitments. We've got a funding stream for the next 3 years. It'll be going on. The plan is for 10 years. It's a 10-year plan. And we're going to really give this a good shot with people, not to people. So it's early days. It is a partnership and it's only the beginning. But I am much, much more optimistic in terms of where we're getting to when you start hearing about employment and training pathways and the way people are picking up this mantra around education, because there is no program that can compensate for a child not attending school more than 3 or 4 days a week. It doesn't matter how good the program is. If people aren't buying the education package, they're not going to get the education they need. That remains our biggest challenge. Thank you.